What's going on, Bay? Today we're going to build a color palette generator in Webflow. It's actually pretty useless, but it's going to use a lot of powerful tools like Typescript and Svelte, and I'm going to go over all the annoying configuration and things to get set up. I am assuming that you have a base level of knowledge with Typescript, JavaScript, and Svelte. You can go to all of the getting started tutorials to get up to speed on those, but want to assume that you are starting from something at least. But I really hope it shows you how these powerful tools can help us to build apps really fast that are very reactive and much better than using just plain vanilla JavaScript. So this app right here, we can create a color palette. We'll add a color. We'll add another red color. We'll add an even paler red color. And we'll get a random color and we'll add it to our palette. And then I'm going to click Add to Webflow, but it's going to say, oh, please select a valid element. So anything that can take children, like the body here, we will add to Webflow. And now we get our palettes introduced. You can see we're creating classes here that have a width and height of 100 pixels and the background color set to the color of this swatch. So again, we're going to get started right now. I hope you enjoy it and let me know how it goes.
Hey there, WebBay.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Reminder, we need Node.js installed in order to get this to work. And you also need the Webflow CLI installed. I've already done this, so I'm going to skip this step. Next, we have Webflow extension init, your app name. So let's go ahead and copy that. And I'll open up a terminal. Zoom in for you here, and I'm going to cd or change directory to where I do all of my coding projects. And let's go, I think in testing. Yeah, so we'll make it in there and we'll just paste that code in. And I'm going to delete this and we'll call this colors or Bay colors. How about that? Bay colors. All right. So this is going to have Webflow build an example project for us. And then what we can do is we can cd into that directory and type code dot. This is going to open up everything with Visual Studio Code. All right, here in VS Code, we see we have webflow.json. This just has the manifest about our app. We have the Typescript configuration file here. There's a README. We have the source directory here that has our index.ts file. And we have the public directory. This is what's actually getting served. Now, a great place to start anytime you're working in a new project is the package.json, because this is going to tell us everything that this app does. So we see that the main is set to index.js. That's essentially the entry point of our app. And then we have some scripts to build and dev, and also the dev dependencies. Now, these are not installed for the project, so I'm going to start by installing those with npm install. Now that those have installed, we can run our dev command. Now, you can see in both build and dev, we have npm install. Since we already ran that, we don't need those, so we can just delete those and save. And we can say npm run dev. Okay, so now let's visit this site here, and we can see that on localhost, we can select a textual element in Designer, press the button below to give it some placeholder content. I'm in my workspace here. I'll press the gear icon. I'll head over to apps and integrations, and then we'll scroll down. I want to create an app. All right, we'll call this Bay Colors, and we'll upload an app icon. I think I've got one in here. Yep, Bay Colors, we'll just use that. Oh, we want the whole thing. It makes colors. And I just like to redirect to the Webflow dashboard. That's all we need. This is going to be in a designer extension. We're not going to use any of the data client APIs. So we'll create the app. And now we need to install the app. I'm going to search for color, the app color. So let's authorize the app on that project. All right, and now we can open. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and drag in a p tag here, and we're just testing out the initial app. We load it, and this is selected. Let's click the button, and we see it just swaps out the original lorem ipsum with some new lorem ipsum. And this is what the default Webflow Designer extension does. All right, quick introduction to Svelte, which we'll be using today. So it's essentially an easier way to write reactive JavaScript. So you can see they have the Hello World app right here. You're setting a variable called name to world, and then you can just kind of print it out with this funky template syntax. It also has reactivity built in, so we can click this button and it'll keep track of the number of times that we've clicked, all stored in this variable count, and then we can do this funky template syntax with the HTML, kind of combining that with JavaScript down here. So this is what's going to make building our app way fast and easier than if we just used vanilla JavaScript. The idea here is similar to other frameworks like React or Vue, but I like Svelte because it compiles everything down to JavaScript from the beginning, so you don't have to deal with anything like Shadow DOM or whatever all that junk is. Okay, however, getting Svelte installed on our project can definitely be a little bit of a bear, so bear with me, but we'll get there. The very first thing is we're going to need a couple of packages to install or libraries, so I'm going to cancel this with Control-C and get back to the terminal inside of VS Code here. And there's 4 packages that I want to install. And there's going to be npm install. We'll install Vite. This is our build tool. We'll install Svelte. And then we need some stuff to get Typescript and Svelte to understand what's going on here. So we have the tsconfig for Svelte as well as the Vite plugin for Svelte so that Vite knows about Svelte. Okay, so we're installing all these. If I go to my package.json, I can see that I messed up and installed them as dependencies, whereas I want them as dev dependencies. So I'm just going to press up to get this here, and I'll delete all this. So uninstall and press enter. And then I'll press up twice and do the -D flag, and that will install them all as dev dependencies. Basically, the difference between dev dependency is that this is in compile time, so these aren't shipped with the actual code, and these are all kind of helper files to get us to spit out some JavaScript. And that's the JavaScript in index.html and CSS that lives here in the public folder. Now, if we look at what Webflow ships with by default, we can see that the build and the dev scripts use TSC. This is the TypeScript compiler, both in dev and build, and we want to use Vite instead. So I'm just going to grab this other dev script that I have. We'll delete this and paste it here. We're still using the concurrently package, but concurrently we're going to build with Vite now and watch, and we're going to serve our extension. And we can up the build script as well to do something similar. So rather than Webflow extension serve, it uses Webflow extension bundle to create a bundle that we could then submit to the Webflow App Store. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what happens when we run npm run dev now. Okay, it says cannot resolve entry module index.html. Remember I said this stuff is a bear, so we got to read through some documentation. So here's the documentation for Vite, and this is the getting started stuff. Now, a lot of this is to build a Vite template, but we've already built our template with Webflow, so those commands don't really do much for us. But if we come down, we can read in the documentation that Vite is looking for index.html as an entry point for our app. And it essentially is asking us to put an index.html file within our app root. So let's go ahead and do that. And if you scroll down just a little bit, we can see those scripts that I used earlier. They're just right down here. So that's how you know where I got those from. All right, let's go ahead. We'll create a new file here in VS Code, and we'll call it index.html. And now let's go ahead and drop in a super basic HTML template file. So we can see we have our HTML up here and the closing tag there. And then we have our head section and our body section. Now, the big thing we have here is in the body, we have a div with an ID of app. This is where Svelte is going to mount our app. So it's going to look for that. And then we have our script down here that looks for the index.ts file. Again, this is kind of pre-build. So what we're telling Vite here is that our app should pull a script called index.ts inside the source directory, which we have here. So let's check and see if adding index.html fixed our error with npm run dev. So if I press enter here, we see what's going on. So it's running Vite, so that's good. We are running the right script, building for production, watching for file changes. So that means it's, if we change our code, while we're making updates, it'll automatically update. Build started, transforming, 3 modules transform, rendering chunks, computing gzip size. And then we see something interesting here. We have dist/index.html and dist/assets/ whatever this is. This is basically the file that Vite has built for us. Now, before, what we were serving with Webflow serve was in the public directory. So we have this index.html, and this is the textual element stuff. Here's index.js, and here is styles.css. So actually, Vite is building to this dist folder, and we can see here there's a different index.html, and this looks like the one we want because it has div id equals app. If we go to this other one, we don't have div id equals app. So what I'm getting at here is that we need to point our serving to this directory and not to the public directory. So like if I went back to Webflow here and refresh, this is actually the wrong app that we're loading. So let me come back and see if I can make that a little more clear. So this one is the lorem ipsum, and this one should have no lorem ipsum. This should just say apps or bay, and then I don't know, let's put hello world here. Actually, let's not do it within the dist file. Let's do it in the index.ts file down here. So let's get rid of all this. I don't think I want any of this. And let's go down to index.html, and we'll just put hello world here and save. So back in Webflow, we can see we're not seeing hello world at all. So what we need to do is the Webflow JSON actually lets us point to where our public directory is. So we can actually find that out if we come back to the Webflow documentation right here. So they talk about the JSON. We can set the size to be something default large, but where do we find out about this? I'm just going to Google for Webflow app manifest file. And that's the first result down here. So this is going to tell us what we can change in here. So we have this size property. There's also comfortable and large. and then a public directory. And this determines the directory from which the Webflow app will be served. So let's go ahead and change it to dist, just like they recommend here. Well, I guess they're not recommending, they're just saying you can, but you could set it to whatever you want. So now if I change public directory to dist, and anytime I change any of these configuration files, I'm gonna stop the server and restart it. And we'll pop back over to Webflow and refresh our app, and now we see hello world. So now we're serving the app that we wanted to serve in the very first place. And what we can do, since we're not using TSC to build our app anymore, and this public directory doesn't make any use for us, we'll just go ahead and delete that. All right, now let's make sure that we can actually get some Svelte code running. So I'm just gonna take this little example here that tracks how many times we click a button, and I'm gonna create a new file, and I'm gonna call it app.svelte. All right, and I'll just paste that into app.svelte. So this is all happy, and you may need to install a browser extension for Svelte. VS Code should warn you about this, but I'm using this one right here, Svelte for VS Code. So this is how my code editor knows about Svelte. Okay, and where are we at right now? So if I look at index.html, we know that we're loading this script file, but we're not actually doing anything inside of it. It's completely blank. So let's initialize our app. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to import that app from app.svelte, and that's in the same directory by that / there. So it's a relative import. And then we're also going to import styles.css. Now I haven't made this or webflow.css, but we'll make this in just a second. And then we're going to create a variable called target element, and we're going to use the query selector method to find the div with the ID of app. Remember, we made that on index.html, so that's why that was key. And now we're going to just check if the target element doesn't exist, then we'll throw an error. It's fine. This is just to satisfy Typescript because this is a TS file. And then we'll create a variable called app, and we'll use the new constructor keyword with app in parentheses there. Now app takes an options argument, and we set the property target to our target element, and then we'll export default app just like that. And I'll save, and let me create those two CSS files as well, styles.css. And I'm not even going to use webflow.css here. Let's delete that, and we'll save. Now we're getting some red squigglies here in index.ts. It says cannot find module app.svelte. Did you mean to set module resolution to node next, or to add aliases to the paths option? So we've got a few configuration things that we need to fix. And we can see down here in the terminal that we're having a parse error when Vite is trying to build our app.svelte file. To make a long story short, TypeScript, Vite, and Svelte are all having trouble playing together, but we can fix this with a Svelte preprocess. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'll just go ahead and create svelte.config.js, and I'm going to drop some code in here. And this is just importing from that library that we installed earlier when we installed those 4 packages. It's getting the Vite preprocess right there. So I'll go ahead and save. And then the other thing I'm going to create is a Vite config as well. Okay, so we've got our Vite config, and we're going to drop this in here. Essentially, we're getting a define config from Vite, and we're getting Svelte from that Svelte plugin. And with this file, we can define some config for our Vite process, and we can see here that we're defining the config to include the Svelte plugin. So this is how we can get Vite to know about our Svelte code. So I'll save all that, and anytime you're doing these config files, we want to stop the server and run npm run dev again. Now we've run our npm run dev command, and we see that we're not getting any errors. We're still getting some red squigglies from TypeScript, but let's go ahead and check on our app in Webflow and see what we got. So I'm just going to open it up again, and we can see now we do have this button clicked 0 times, and if we click it, we do get this working. So we just need to fix our TypeScript configuration file. So I've added module resolution to be node next, and then there's a red squiggly here that says module must be set to node next when module resolution is set to that. So we'll go ahead and set that. Nope, I don't want ES6. I want node next. Oops, I don't want node 16. I want node next. So we'll save that, and is it still complaining? It's not, but we still haven't fixed this over here. And some other things I want to add to the tsconfig here is I want to extend the TypeScript definitions for Svelte, tsconfig.json there, and then I'm going to specify what I'm including in this project. This is just in case I had anything I didn't want to include, but we can see we're just basically looking in the source directory for any types files, that's the .d.ts, any TypeScript files, any JavaScript files, and any Svelte files. So we'll save that and run our server again. And I was able to clear the red squiggly by also restarting the TypeScript server by hitting Command-Shift-P, and then you just restart the TypeScript server that way. And now I'm not seeing any errors, and I think we've got all of our config figured out. All right, last thing we can do is we can just add lang equals ts here up in the script tag for Svelte. And now we're starting to get some cool autocomplete and things like that with TypeScript. So we're getting all the benefits and none of the errors, thank God. I know it takes a little while, but it's worth it in the end. So we'll just npm run dev. We're not getting any errors. So the other thing I'll mention is that if you just want to skip all the configuration steps, I actually built a boilerplate template here, Webflow app Svelte Vite. And you could clone this down to your own repo and get started just with that. So I probably should have mentioned that before, but now you know. Okay, let's finally write some code. So I'll delete everything within the script tags here. We'll delete this button, and I'll just open up some style tags as well. This is where we'll put our CSS for our app. Now let's start with our HTML. The very first thing I'm going to do is create a wrapper class called control panel, and this is going to be where the user makes their selections. So then we'll have two divs. They're both going to be flex row, and these are just to put some buttons in a row. Now inside of there, I want to start putting our inputs and our buttons. So the very first input we can use is a input that's of type color, and we'll give that an ID color input. We will bind the value to this variable called new color, and we'll set a class on it called color picker. And we're also going to get a label, and the label is just going to be that color set to uppercase. We're also going to define two more buttons, one button to add the color, and another one to generate a random color. So we need to write the functions for both of these as well. If I save, we'll get some errors that the stuff it's looking for doesn't actually exist. Let's go ahead and define that variable new color, and we'll just set it to be black at first. And now we'll see it's also looking for add color and generate random color. So we can just define some empty functions. Sure. Okay, let's check on GitHub Copilot to make sure that it did some stuff. All it's doing is it's getting a random value here. This is a value between 0 and 1, and multiplying it by some value that probably gets it to the max hex value that we can have. And then grabs the floor of that, so rounds down, and then sets it to string of 16. And this value 16 is the radix, which I'm assuming is setting it to some sort of hexadecimal thing. And this is way more big brain than I could come up with on my own, but we'll see how GitHub Copilot did here. And then we'll set new color to be the hashtag symbol plus random color. And we'll also define our function add color. And I'm just going to write later. Okay, so I think we've satisfied all of our errors here. So that's looking good. I'll bring this down just a little bit so you can see more. Okay, so we can see we've got some UI going on here. So we have a input here. This is our color input. If I click it, I can change the color, and we'll notice that the color value over here is updating dynamically with that. So this is an awesome way. We wrote very little code and got a lot of functionality with Svelte. We can click this random color button, and it'll just get a random color for us here. And then we can click add to palette. This does absolutely nothing. Let's take a quick look again at what's going on here so that we know how Svelte is working. So the big one is this generate random color button. We're setting an onClick function to be that generate random color function. When we generate random color, we set new color to this randomly generated color, and we've also bound the value of new color to this input. So that's how anytime we're pressing this button here, we're getting this input to update as well as this label right here. So super cool. I hope you like this, and hopefully it convinces you to be a Svelte adopter. All right, let's work on storing color palettes now. We'll go ahead and define a variable called colors. This is going to be an array of strings. These strings are going to be each individual color that looks just like that. Within add color, the very first thing we're going to do is check that new color exists and that the color is not already within our array. And we're going to use the .includes method here, but you'll notice this is going to yell at us for some bad config. So it's saying property includes does not exist on type string array. Do you need to change your target library? Try changing the lib compiler option to ES 2016 or later. So let's come back here. We can see that lib is set to ES6. I'm going to go ahead and just set this to ESNext. And we're getting some autocomplete there. And I'll set the target to ESNext as well so that we're using modern JavaScript. And if I save that, then we can see that app.svelte, actually the error clears up. So let's go ahead and continue. We will now set the colors array to be what the colors array originally was. That's the spread operator here. And then we'll inject that new color right here at the end. Next, we'll work on displaying the palette to the user. So we'll define a div, give it a class of palette, and within there we'll have an each loop. This is some nice Svelte template syntax. So we're looping over each of the colors in our colors array as a variable named colors, and we're giving it just a key identity here of color. This helps Svelte keep track of everything. Next, we'll define another div. It's going to get a class of color box and a style where we set the background color equal to the value of this color here that we're looping over. Lastly, we will put the text of the color in the middle of the box. So this is going to display the hexadecimal string to the user so that they know what the hex color is there. We can see that we've already defined the classes for palette. If I scroll down here, it's just a display flex and has some gaps and padding. And then color box down here is just a square to represent a swatch, and it's centering everything so that the text appears in the middle, has some border radius, and a hover effect here. I'll go ahead and save, and let's see how this works now. Okay, so we've got our palette here. Let's go ahead and add a red color. We'll click the add to palette, and we can see we've added red to our palette down here. And then we'll go and add blue, and we'll add that to the palette. Awesome, this is already the world's ugliest color palette. And now we'll add green. And so we've added red, green, and blue to our color palette. Next, let's add some functionality so that when the user clicks a color palette item, then it goes away and is removed from our colors array. All right, let's define a function and we'll call it remove color. And this is going to take a color that's a string, and GitHub Copilot's already written it for me, but let's go ahead and check what's going on. So we are getting the colors array up here, and we're setting it to the value returned by the filter function. So each array has a bunch of methods, including includes and filter. And with filter here, what we do is we go over each individual color represented by the letter C here. And then this is the code that we're executing here. We're checking does C equal to color. Actually, we're checking does it not equal to color. So if this color is not color, then it passes. Otherwise, if it is, then it gets filtered out. And we just store that back in colors. Now, the other thing I want to do real quick too is in index.html, get rid of this hello world, and let's go ahead and check out the new functionality. So I'll refresh the app here, and we'll go ahead and add red, add to palette, and click it. And nothing happens because we didn't actually connect it to a remove an event. So let's come back down to our color here. So we're using this as a div. I'm gonna go ahead and change this to a button because it's something that's gonna do some action. And we can do just kind of pull this code that we have up here. So on a click, we want to remove the color. So let's go ahead and save that. And why is it erroring here? So remove color takes a parameter, and normally when we have these on-click events, they receive events, but so we'll just override that by having an anonymous function here, and then we'll pass the color value right here. So we can save, and now let's double check that we actually got this thing working. We will refresh. We'll add red to the palette, and we'll click red, and it goes away. And let's, do some different spaces here. So we'll add this one to the palette. We'll add this one to the palette. And what happens if we remove the first? Then we're good. So we can't add the same one, remember, because we have that include. So that's good. Let's just keep playing with it to make sure things are working good. So add and then delete the middle one, and it's working. So great. Now the UI in our app is working great, but we need to connect it to Webflow and the designer. So I'm going to create a button, and it's going to be our add to Webflow button. Now it gets an on-click handler to add to Webflow, so let's create that function now. All right, let's go ahead and define our function. This is going to be add to Webflow, and since we're interacting with designer, I'm going to make this function asynchronous because some of these methods return promises and may take time and may time out, so we're going to use the async await syntax within this function. All right, let's go ahead and define an array called elements to add. So this is going to hold all of the swatches that we want to add to the designer canvas. Next, we're going to loop through all the colors within our colors array, and we're going to create a DOM element for each of those. And we're going to create just a div here. So it's going to look like a swatch and show up as a square of color on the screen. Next, we'll create a new style, and we're going to call webflow.createStyle here, and we're going to pass it the string of color underscore and then the value of color. This is a template string that we can interpolate using this $sign syntax. Next, we will, on new style, call the setProperties function and pass the properties that it's going to have. Namely, it's going to have a width and a height to make it a square, and it's going to have a background color. So that gets passed in as an object, and we'll just add some space here, and we'll set the background color equal to color. We'll set the width equal to 100 pixels and the height equal to 100 pixels. Next, we'll call setStyles on our div, and we will set that new style that we just created. So we're essentially creating a div here that has that background color and a little bit of size information so it shows up on the screen. Next, we need to add this div to our elements to add. And then once this loop is done executing, we also need to get the selected element on the canvas. So here's where we're using that await syntax to get the selected element. So we can see if we hover here that it returns a promise of any element or null. So we need to check that this is not null as well. So we'll see if selected element is not null, or if it doesn't have children, like we need to be able to drop in the divs as children. So we want to make sure of that as well. What we'll do in those cases though is we'll notify the user that there's an error, please select a valid element, and then we'll just escape from the function and do nothing. Otherwise, we will set the children on the selected elements to our array of elements to add. We can see that this set children takes an array of any elements, and we will then call selected element.save. And we can come back to our project, and let's go ahead and create a little bit of a color palette here. So we got red, we got more pale red, we got even paler red. So we've got 3 red colors, and body should be able to accept children. So let's add to Webflow, and we can see now that we are getting these colors right here on our designer canvas. and it's creating the class for us here. It's got the width and height, and down here in the background color, it is specified. All right, and that's everything I wanted to cover in this lesson. I really hope you enjoyed seeing stuff like Svelte and TypeScript in action. It's tough to get your head around at first, and the configurations are pretty annoying, but once you get everything set up, it can be really powerful. So let me know how it goes. If you have any help, of course, be sure to reach out. And also, I'll drop a link to the GitHub so you can always copy and paste any of the code that you need from there. All right, see you in the next one.